The Houston Chronicle reported that the Texas DPS officers on the border have been ordered to push small children and nursing babies on the Rio Grande back into the river and told not to give water to asylum seekers. Is this true? And what is your reaction to an email that the Chronicle reported from a trooper calling this inhumane and that these policies need to change?
Jack, to be candid with you, I have seen the article, but I'm not aware of the email. It has not been brought to my attention personally or in my position as Lieutenant Governor of the state. But of course, we'll look into that. And it's an email, as I understand, from someone on the border to someone at DPS, and we'll just have to look into it.
Is it concerning to you?
Of course, it would be concerning to me. At the same time, Jack, I will tell you that the reason we put up concertina wire and the reason we're putting the buoys in the river is to stop people from coming. At the last year of Trump, we had the border under control. About 400,000 people or so were apprehended on the border. About 2/3 of those in Texas, because the border is 1,900 miles from San Diego to Brownsville. We're about 1,250 miles of that part. And then in the first year of Biden, it's been 2 million apprehended, or near 2 million every year, plus the gotaways, hundreds of thousands, plus, Jack, the ones we never see who cross the border. So we cannot absorb this influx of people coming here illegally into our state and into our country. We used to spend, every time I would write the budget in the past, up until Biden came into office, we spent about 800 million on the budget. We do a 2-year budget, 400 million a year. And this past budget is 4 billion of our Texas taxpayer money. There is nothing wrong with protecting your country and protecting your state. Obviously, you want to do it in a humane way, but it's look, Joe Biden, anyone who drowns in the river, anyone who is thrown into sex slavery, any criminal that crosses the border, which they do, and all those things I just described happen every day. It's Joe Biden's fault. He said, keep coming, just keep coming. He doesn't really care if babies are drowning in the river. He doesn't care if people are put into child or sex slavery as a young girl. He doesn't care that the #1 killer of Americans under 45 is fentanyl. So this all goes back to him. We're just trying to protect our state, protect our country the best of our ability when the federal government's not doing the job. But of course, we want to do everything we do in the most humane way that we possibly can.
Another story that made headlines was the gag order that you issued yesterday in the Paxton impeachment trial. Why was that necessary in your mind?
So I'm under an order of the impeachment rules that the Senate passed 25-3 about a month ago. And so I can't talk too much about the trial, only what's been in the public arena, which we published the rules and we put out our press release yesterday, and we posted our website. By the way, anyone wanting to stay up to date on the trial before the trial and once it begins on September 5th can go to LTGOV, Lieutenant Gov, ltgov.texas.gov, and they can see what's happening every day on the motions that are filed before the trial, et cetera. So the reason I put the gag order out, Jack, was that both sides have been making inflammatory comments, and I'm saying what I said in my press release, so I'm staying inside my guidelines and my rules that I have on me. Both sides have been saying some rather inflammatory things. Think about this, Jack. In a normal trial, you have a jury pool, and you select from that jury pool. Our jury pool is 31 senators. They will be set according to the Constitution. So in a normal trial, if someone is prejudiced potentially by something they've read or heard or seen, well, they could be excused from the jury. And so I have to protect the jury. I have to keep this a fair trial. The defendant deserves a fair trial. And so the reason for the gag order is to get people on both sides to step back and not be talking about this case moving forward, or not be leveling any accusations from either side. And that's the reason for the gag order.
I wanted to ask you about a Texas Tribune report this morning that your campaign reported a $1 million contribution and a $2 million loan from the group Defend Texas Liberty PAC, which has been critical of the impeachment and has defended Attorney General Ken Paxton. What do you say to Texans who may be concerned about that and your previous call and continued call for impartiality in the trial?
Well, Jack, there are people on many sides of this case who contribute to senators and to my campaign. And so we will all take a oath of impartiality, and that's not an issue whatsoever. Um, the issue really here is, for me as the presiding officer and the judge, is to have a fair trial. And I think, Jack, that what you've seen by what we've done so far has really amazed a lot of people. Many thought we might just dismiss it. Well, we're bound by the Constitution to do so, to have the trial. And if you did dismiss it, it would go back over there and the House could hold it for a year or two, who knows? And Attorney General Paxton would still not be able to work. So we will take it on, but we've been, again, I'm staying under my orders here. I'm talking about the rules that we passed, 31 rules, Jack, voted on 25-3 by the Senate, but there were a few senators missing during that time. But those rules are very clear, and we're going to have a fair trial, and the defense will have a chance to make their case, and as will the House managers who created this impeachment. So, Jack, we're all moving forward. The 12 Democrats, the 19 Republicans, everyone will take that oath.
I did have one other quick question on that.
Sure.
How concerned are you about the outside influence on senators, particularly Republican senators, who are going to be the jurors in this case?
Well, I don't think you should separate it out into Republican or Democrats. And Jack, I'm under impeachment rules not to discuss the case. So I'm not going to discuss that or my opinions of what's happening on the outside. My gag order that I issued yesterday as the judge of this trial is very clear that obviously there is a concern. So if you read the gag order, which I know you have, and people can go to ltgov.texas.gov and read that and all the other motions and all of the rules. People ask me all the time about what's happening, how's this happening. All the rules are published for this trial. And so that's how I answered. That was reason for the gag order. Of course, there's would be concern there.
Want to ask you about the property tax cut deal.
Yes.
That was
finally to the biggest news of ever in the history of the country in terms of property tax relief. But go ahead.
Well, I wanted to ask you, is this something that the state can sustain? And when we've seen these kind of deals before, property taxes for schools have crept back up. How will the state try to keep that from happening this time?
So, Jack, I know you always do this full length on your podcast, I guess, or you post it online. This is a great opportunity for me to answer that question in long form, because you don't have enough time on television for me to explain it in a 2-minute story. But Jack, here's the deal. What you just said, you're absolutely right. It used to be that way in the old days. Appraisals went up and whatever tax relief you received kind of disappeared. That's the way it was 15, 20 years ago, even as recent as 5 or 6 years ago. What we did in 2019, Jack, was we separated for the first time ever your appraisal that comes out in the spring and your tax bill, which comes out in October or November. Before that, whatever your appraisal went up, it went up 7 or 8 or 9%. You could pretty much count on your tax bill going up the same. The local entities never cut the taxes back, even though the values went up. So today, Jack, and I challenge all of your viewers too, and there's always an exception to the rule, but if you go back and look in 2021, go back a year, look at what your appraisal was in the spring, and then what was your tax bill. And you'll see that your tax bill was much less than your appraisal, almost in all cases. In fact, the Houston Chronicle wrote an article that for the first time in decades, property taxes for schools actually went down for many people, or flat, or only up a little bit. And it's because, Jack, we have capped the growth of budgeting in school districts to 2.5%. They can't grow any more than 2.5% from year to year. And cities and counties cannot grow any more than 3.5% from year to year unless the people vote for higher taxes. So what happens as the value goes up, see it as a seesaw, your value goes up. By the way, everybody wants to sell their house for more than they paid for it. It's not a bad thing. You just don't want to be taxed on it. So as your value goes up, Jack, they have to lower the tax rate to get the seesaw down to no more than 3.5 on average, or 2.5 at the schools. And so the appraisals are not the factor. They're essentially not a factor at all. And again, this year, people have gotten their appraisals this past spring, a few months ago. Wait till October, November, and compare the two. So that's the reason, Jack, what we're doing now will not, the homestead never goes away. People will vote on that $100,000 homestead exemption, which you know that I and the Senate fought for. We never took one step back on that because it's huge, Jack. So if you live in the average $300,000 home in Texas, which is 3 to 330,000, that's the average home. So now you're going to be paying school taxes on a $200,000 home. And by the way, Jack, for 397 school districts out of 1,014 in the state, for 397 districts, the average value, Jack, of the homes in those districts are $100,000, mostly rural, small counties, small towns. So that means their school property taxes are disappearing, going away. And the tax bill that you're going to get, Jack, and every one of your viewers with this bill that Senator Paul Betancourt passed and the entire Senate, myself worked on hard for years, but particularly this session, and we never backed up from it. It's cutting your school taxes, Jack, 41%. 41%, unheard of. And for business properties, 23%. And so that will be in the Constitution when people vote on it in November. That will be in the Constitution. That always has to be funded. The compression piece, which is actually reducing the school rate, that depends on the sales tax flow we have any given year. But I believe, Jack, what we're doing, we can maintain moving forward. And so I'm comfortable with where we are. And look, Jack, when I came into the Senate in 2007, to give you a sense of things, how fast we've grown, and inflation along the way, really high under Biden, but it goes up every year. When I came in, Jack, the first budget from memory in 2007 was 165 billion. That's a 2-year budget. This year was 300 billion or more. That's how much we've grown, Jack. So you absorb what you don't ever, like the surplus. You don't want to stack everything into ongoing cost. So we were very careful about that. What you want to do is put a lot of that money into one-time costs. Like we created the new Texas University Fund for $3 billion, one time. Put $1 billion into Parks and Wildlife to buy land, one time. So you do one-time things that you don't have to maintain, and then you do other things that you do have to maintain, and you try to keep those in that area that we can support ongoing.
I wanted to ask you, people were surprised by the fact that because historically you and the governor have been on the same page, and this time around it was a little different when it came to property tax relief. And why were you and the governor and the speaker not on the same page on this initially?
Well, initially, the speaker and I were not on the same page on this. He wanted to come in with a cap that would have greatly distorted the housing market and only ended up at the end of the day increasing your taxes, not lowering them. It was like New York, New Jersey, and California have tried. It does not work. So we didn't agree on that. But they did vote for a homestead exemption. If you go back and remember, they voted for the $100,000 homestead exemption during session. But they had other things in the bill that we couldn't agree to. The governor was pretty much silent the entire session. And we worked well together this session. And as you said, we don't not always agree. And we have our good disagreements behind closed doors, which I believe is what people really want us to do, work out our differences. People don't want to see us quarreling in public. But I was taken aback, quite frankly, Jack, on the first day of the first special session, when the governor put on the call only compression. He wanted to spend every dollar of the 18 billion, roughly, in just compression, which would have been about a $750 tax cut for every homeowner. Our plan, which was 70% compression and 30% homestead exemption, is giving everyone about a $1,300 cut. If you live in the average home, you're going to get about a $1,300 cut in your property tax, school property taxes. Seniors will get a little bit more, $1,400 to $1,500. If you live in a $500,000 home, your cut's going to be about $3,000. And so there was a difference. And I was actually, again, taken aback when the governor came out and said, the House is the best plan. That's just wrong, Jack. Both of us had the exact money in the budget. The House was not the best plan when we started, because again, if we had done what the governor and the House wanted, every one of your listeners out there on the average $300 and some $1,000 home would have gotten about $740. And under our plan, with the homestead included, they're going to get between $1,300 and $1,500, depending if they're over or under 65. So our senators were unanimous. You know, I had a press conference towards the end of session or the special session. All 31 senators, Republicans and Democrats, stood behind me and said, we're not going to do all compression. Why would we take $700 out of the pocket of homeowners and give it only, you know, to other areas when it's the homeowners who deserve and need the property tax relief? So So in terms of when the governor said that, quite frankly, I don't consider it an argument between us. I just couldn't let it stand. Our tax cut was better, and we're going to fight for it. And I appreciate the speaker in the last 7 to 10 days of this special session. We worked really well together. Again, they'd already voted on most of our package earlier. So we worked together. We got it solved. It was between the speaker and myself. The governor had said, he eventually said, well, I'll sign anything you send to me. So the speaker and I and Senator Betancourt and Will Metcalf, Representative Metcalf, we worked all that out, working night and day for about 7 days a few weeks ago.
I did have one other question on this area,
Sure.
and that was the governor and some conservatives advocated for putting the state on a path to gradually eliminate the school M&O property tax altogether. And I'm wondering now, is that door closed for good?
Well, it's just not possible, Jack. And I don't want to disappoint our listeners out there, but I'm going to just be honest. We can never totally 100% eliminate the school property tax, not 100%. Now, again, we're reducing it 41% this year, and that will be moving forward. It will be a 41% cut from where they are, and we'll continue to nibble away at that. But, you know, a government only has 3 ways of funding government, main 3 ways: sales tax, income tax, or property tax. Well, we're never going to have an income tax in this state as long as conservatives are in charge, and we put it in the Constitution to make it hard, even if Democrats took over one day, which I hope and don't think they will in my lifetime, and I hope to live quite a while longer. So we're not going to have an income tax here. Democrats couldn't get it passed either. And then secondly, you have sales tax and property tax. We already have one of the highest sales tax if you combine local and state, about 8.25%. The highest sales tax in the country is California at 9 cents. For us to eliminate all school property taxes, Jack, would take about 19 to 20 cents. Some figure it a little bit more. Well, that's never, ever going to pass. It's never going to pass. People would never. Can you imagine putting 20 cents on everything you bought, and plus increasing that to other items like food and different things you don't pay tax on? That's never going to happen. So then you say, well, you just have to take state revenues and get rid of it. Well, Jack, it's projected in 2024 that we are going to collect about $72 billion at the state. That's for sales tax, hotel tax, you know, whatever tax we have. All our sales tax is the main thing. $72 billion. If we tried to get rid of all property taxes, it would be $74 billion. So we wouldn't have any money to do anything. In fact, we'd be $2 billion short. No money for education, healthcare, Department of Public Safety, and those 3 things are 96% of our budget. We don't have any money. So school taxes are about half, Jack. So about $35 billion. And that would mean if you took all our revenue and did nothing but eliminate the school property tax, you'd have to cut every school budget by 50%, all healthcare by 50%, and our public safety by 50% that we pay for at the state. So it's not possible, Jack. You just can't get there. But we can continue to chip it away. And if we can, you know, when I came in, Jack, to lieutenant governor in 2015, the homestead exemption was $15,000. It had been there for about 20 years that way. And I took it to 25 in 15. Then I raised it to 40 in 21, and this year to 100. So that's the best way that you can get to saving people taxes. And that is to exempt something that's taxed. So if you live in a $300,000 home, you're paying taxes on a $200,000 home, or go up the list or down the list. And that's the best way to do it. And that's the way we did it. And again, I appreciate the speaker and I working together on this. We worked together and we got it done.
I want to ask you about teacher raises. When can they expect them, and about how much?
Well, a couple of good things, Jack. I met this couple just this weekend at a wedding on retired teachers. We finally put the COLA in. They've wanted forever, the cost of living allowance. You know, most teachers check is between $1,500 and $2,000. You know, a lot of our teachers that retired a long time ago didn't make that much money. My wife was a retired teacher. I don't think she ever made more than $28,000. She retired a number of years ago. But for all of our retired teachers, 75 and over, they're getting a check for $7,500, Jack. And if they own a home, they're getting a $110,000 exemption on their home. And I ran into 2 teachers married to each other for 54 years Saturday, and they're so happy. They're both over 75. They're getting a check between the 2 of them for $15,000, $7,500 each. And they're going to take $110,000 off their homestead exemption, and they live in an average home, so their school tax are being cut dramatically. And teachers, retired teachers, are going to get a benefit moving forward. And by the way, Jackie didn't ask me this question, but it ties in with the teacher pay raise, is that we need to take care of our teachers, not just now, but in the future, so that we keep them in the profession and they don't leave. And the only reason we were able to do this, Jack, was because of the surplus. Remember, I said to you a few moments ago, one-time things. So we've put about 4.7 billion as a one-time check that we're writing to the teacher retirement system to create that COLA system that will last for the next 30 to 40 years. So now let's talk to present day teachers. We gave them a raise in 2019, and I drove that. I campaigned on it, of giving every teacher thousands of dollars in raises. We put $2 billion in a teacher pay in 2015, outside the way we normally fund schools, because we looked at it, Jack, over a 10-year period. School district funding had increased 35%, but teacher pay had only gone up 11%. It wasn't that we didn't have money in the system. It wasn't getting to the most important. It wasn't getting to the most important person in the system, and that's the teacher. The most important, next to your parents, most important person your child will be with as they're growing up. I believe teaching should be a profession, not just a job. So we put $2 billion in then, and we've continued that, maintain those raises. And now this year we have, Jack, $5 billion set aside in the budget for additional school funding, which includes a teacher pay raise. And what the Senate passed in our budget was $6,000 for teachers in districts with 20,000 kids or less, because our suburban and urban teachers, for the most part, make more money than our rural teachers. So we wanted to close that pay gap, and we're giving $2,000 across the board to every other teacher in the state. And so we want teachers to be, I want every teacher to quickly get up, and many are, we have teachers making 70 and 80, but most teachers are in the 60s. I want to get up there as fast as we can to get everyone at that level. And we've set it up so that hopefully the best teachers get the most money. We leave that up largely to the school district. So we passed that bill out of the Senate during the regular session. Teacher pay, it was Senate Bill 9, but it failed in the House. It was the Teacher Bill of Rights. It also talked about making sure there's discipline in the classroom, because a lot of teachers are leaving for that reason. Their classes are unruly. And we talked about a number of things. We passed a parental bill of rights for school choice and a teacher bill of rights. And we had the pay raise in it, but it didn't pass the House. In the session we're in now, that just wrapped up last week, after we passed property tax, we passed the original bill over with the teacher pay raise in the bill. The House made a decision, and I respect the decision, but they made the decision to only focus on property taxes this time around, and we'll be back in October to address that issue. So I gave you a long answer, but a really detailed answer, because the teachers have to understand they're so valued. They need to understand they're valued. And we want to do the best we can to attract the best and the brightest to teaching. Jack, I was chair of education in 2013. I love public education. School choice does not destroy public education, by the way. Only about 5%. If you go statewide, the history of school choice in the country, only about 5% of parents opt for school choice, because most like their schools and the kids like their friends. But every parent deserves a right to put their child in the school that's best for their child. And that's their decision, not the school system's decision. But it was interesting. Back in 2013, when I was chair of education, Jack, we were talking about why we couldn't get men and women to go into teaching like they used to. And there was, I don't know who it was, and he said, well, Senator, Mr. Chairman, let me tell you why. He said, the answer is simple. And when he said it to me, it was simple, but I'd never thought about it. He said in the 60s and 70s and the 80s and the 90s, for women particularly, they didn't have many job options. The corporate world was closed to them. Legal professions were closed to them. And we're talking about in general terms here. Obviously, we had female lawyers and doctors and in the corporate world, but you became a nurse or a teacher. So the very best and brightest became teachers. But starting in the mid-90s, and rightfully so, that glass ceiling was removed and women were welcome to every profession. And so women today, and my wife's a great example. She graduated from school in the 70s. She was a teacher. She didn't have a lot of options then. So we lost that part of the workforce. And so we have to go to our young people today, Jack, and say, Teaching is a great profession. You can make great money. It's a great job. It's an important job. It's a noble profession. That's what we must do. And one of the things, Jack, and I'll wrap up with this, and most people don't even know, is that if you'll become a math or science teacher, we will pay practically for all of your 4-year education. You just have to agree to teach 8 years. That's it. We'll pay for it if you become a math or science, because that's where we're really short. So Jack, that's a long answer to your easy question, but we'll eventually pass a teacher pay raise, I believe, in October. And after we get through with this impeachment trial in September, and we'll move forward. But the Senate's already passed the raise 2 different times. The House will come together and pass it eventually.
And it'll be permanent raises?
Yes, it depends on the bill. See, what we passed in the special session. So we passed permanent raises in the regular session because it wasn't on the call. It wasn't a permanent raise. It was a supplemental raise. So every teacher would have gotten the money for the next 2 years. And then in 25, we just come back and expand it. But now, because education will be on the call, whatever we pass, is if we have our way, will be a permanent raise, not just a one-time raise.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it.